let's talk about Matt Milano and let's talk about injuries, because unfortunately, one thing consistent with these Buffalo Bills is coming into training camp, there's been injury concerns around a star player for the last couple years. Last year, it was Von Miller. The year before that, it was Tre'Davious White. This year, it's Matt Milano. And we've seen through minicamp and OTAs that Milano's been out there doing a little bit of stuff. The Bills have been kind of coy about his status, not committing to the fact he's going to be ready to go as soon as camp opens. Two-part question for you. One, how optimistic are you that Matt Milano will be ready to go by the first game of the season? Two, how optimistic are you that the Bills will see the same version of Matt Milano that they had pre-injury?
To answer the latter first, not optimistic. I think it's we touched on it even last episode, but it's more warranted. It's further conversation is more warranted. Ooh, we got through that point. Where it's just, I think it's foolish to expect it, especially how severe that injury was, or is, depending on where it stands. But I think you're gonna still have the same player between the ears. So the smart Matt Milano will be there. It'll probably take a little bit to get him game sharp, we'll call it, between the ears. But overall, he's still the same player mentally. The physical kind of limitations that will come with still the recovery process to get back to 100% will be there for weeks to come. That is the nature of the beast. That is severe injuries. We, of course, had the biggest prime example with Von Miller last year, and even you saw it with Trey White going into last season before he had then another injury on top of it, where they're not themselves. It will feel disappointing in a sense, but I think there is that caution that should be there, or the realism that is, you can't just expect this guy to be a free. You can't expect Adrian Peterson in, what was it, 2009 or 2012 or whatever it was, when he tore his ACL and then magically came back and was the best running back in the league still. Like that is freakish upon freakish. That is one of one. No one else does that. You have to understand that these are serious injuries and it takes time to come back. Now, to the former and things like that, I think there's a good chance that he's back come season start. I would find it that way. You haven't heard anything about him starting on PUP, although I don't think they have to officially report that until camp starts. But it's not like there's been, rumors out there that that's supposedly what's going to happen or anything like that. And I think that's a good sign. I think that's a great sign that he's going to come into camp. He's not going to be on the PUP, and we're going to, at least the coaching staff, the training staff, everyone else is going to get a good look of him kind of in walkthroughs, soft practices, whatever it is that he's capable of, and see where he goes. From there, it's still late July, and you have to be ready by early, the second week of September. That's when he needs to be ready. That's still a plenty of time to kind of get to a percentage healthy, where I believe that someone that got hurt when he did should be able to be ready, I would think. With my very little medical experience, Josh, might I also note on this, I do believe, off history of other players being hurt and things like that, he should be okay. It's just what level of Matt Milano we get is ultimately in question here, and we're really not going to see that until week one. Like, what if that ends up being when he starts? Whenever that first start comes, that's when we'll ultimately know what we have. And I think hopefully the coaching staff can kind of evaluate that overall, and maybe prepare best come week one. But if they believe, let's say, a 75% Milano is there come week one, and that's still better than 100% Dorian Williams or whatever it might be, so be it. And we'll just have to trust that. And then if come real games, come that week one game, all of a sudden it's like, oh no, 75% Matt Milano is a problem, unfortunately, still for this defense. That's where then, at least as we talked about last episode, it does feel like they kind of have emergency plan Bs and Cs back there that they can probably facilitate and make happen.
Yeah, they're in good shape at backup linebacker, much better than last year when they were forced to have AJ Klein come off the couch and start a playoff game. I think week one is interesting because the context of week one is unique. This isn't just Matt Milano. I think any player on the Bills that maybe gets banged up in training camp or banged up in preseason that comes into week 1 questionable, I think the Bills are going to be in a position where they have to err on the side of caution. Remember, the Bills play a non-conference opponent in the Arizona Cardinals week 1, and then 4 days later, they travel down to Miami to play arguably their most important division game of the season in week 2. And we all know how tough those 4-day turnarounds on Thursday Night Football can be injury-wise. If someone's banged up, they're not quite 100%, I could absolutely see the Bills giving them week 1 off, which what a bummer to miss week 1 after you waited all year for it, just to make sure you're right for week 2. Because if the inverse is we can play you week 1, but we're just not sure what that recovery looks like, can you be ready to go for another game week 2? The Bills are going to prioritize the Dolphins game just based on the importance of that game in the standings versus a non-conference opponent. I don't know how much that relates to Matt Milano, because to me, that's more of a just 4 days longer rest kind of deal. But I just wanted to make that point. I am more confident than even I was on last week's episode, Luke. I started doing some research on his injury, and the specific injury is a right tibia fracture. I follow Banged Up Bills. Luka does too on Twitter, and he has some great observations. And just by looking at some pictures, he was able to determine that maybe Matt Milano's injury wasn't quite as severe as it could have been. It doesn't appear there was any ligament damage. And he did give some examples in his article of players that have had this same exact injury and come back in a 1-year span, one of which is JJ Watt, had that injury, came back the next year, and had a 16-sack season. So his observation on this injury is it's like an 8-month recovery. If Milano's ready to go by week 1, then there really is not a whole lot of risk in him not coming back to peak performance. I will say, I share Luka's skepticism on that, not only because he's coming off of a leg injury, he is turning 30 in a handful of days. And, the older you get, the slower your recovery. He missed football last season after the first 5 weeks. So I embraced, that almost sounds like I embraced something. I am braced for Matt Milano not looking like all pro, third best linebacker in the ESPN power rankings of linebackers, and maybe just being a very good linebacker. And next to Terrell Bernard, that's just fine. Thanks for watching this clip from Bill's Chat. For the full episode, you can find the link in the description. While you're here, we would love it if you took the time to like and subscribe. That way you'll never miss when we upload new content to Bill's Chat on YouTube.